Hi there and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do something a bit different. I feel like I say this in a lot of videos, but it is actually quite different from my usual painting videos, and I hope you guys will enjoy it as well. It's actually been a hobby of mine for quite some time. I think about 4 years ago I did this quite often, and I was actually making posable art dolls, or creatures as I would call them, because you can make them dolls, but I make animals, so they're more closely related to animals. And I really love making them, and I feel kind of sad that I stopped doing it. But recently I've started watching a lot of doll customizers on YouTube. I don't know if that's what you call them, but they repaint dolls and make them sculptures in a way. And I really enjoy watching that. And I thought, well, I can do this myself in a way by doing what I did before, which is posable art creatures. And I really enjoy making them. And I hope that you guys will be interested in watching. I'm gonna make Greylegs from my book Greylegs, and you've probably heard about him by now if you've been watching my channel. He is the main character from my book, well, one of the main characters from my book Greylegs that I'm currently doing a Kickstarter for, and is currently probably reached 10k by this point. It is at £9,880 at the moment, which means that I can start making my other book idea that I already have in storage. I planned for. So I will of course be vlogging that, so you guys can see the whole process yet again with another book. I just realized the doll's been in the frame this whole. Enjoy the sneak peek! Anyway, other things. We reached 30k on YouTube, which is absolutely insane. Thank you guys so much for wanting to watch me so much as you are doing, and follow me even though I do a lot of different things like digital watercolor. It's gonna be a very creative channel. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope God, I can't speak. I hope that you guys enjoy this creation of Greylegs. I'll let you know right now that it's going to be quite a lengthy video. It's a really big process of making a doll like this, and I hope you guys don't mind. I tried shortening it down, but there's just so much I want to show how I do, so I'm gonna leave it in and hope that you guys don't mind a 30-minute long video. Starting out with the eyes, I got them of a seller on Etsy, and they have a lot of different designs, and these ones were perfect for Greylegs. I'm super excited to find them. They are meant for like plushies or soft toys, so I had to remove the bit on the back so they would fit inside his head. So it was a bit of a struggle getting those off, but I did eventually. Then I moved on to sketching the whole plan for Greylegs, so I used the eyes for size. I sketched out his whole body, figured out where everything would go, how big they would be, so I had a plan for the whole sculpture so I wouldn't like start making something a little bit bigger than it should be. I used a blue pencil to kind of figure out where the clay would be, and then a red one to see where the wire would be. So I needed a guide. It's very important to have a guide. If you don't have one, you're just going to be in the dark most of the time. So yeah, just plan out where you want the clay to be. Of course, I put clay a bit more places than I wanted to at this point, but it doesn't really matter. The wire I'm using is aluminium, and I've used this for my other dolls as well, so I know it's durable and it actually keeps its shape pretty well under weight. I did discover later, and we'll talk about this, that the weight was a bit too much because it's a pretty big doll, and I didn't realize until later, so I had to support it with even more wire, but I'll show you how I did that later. So I just follow my red line, which is the wire line, and I figure out how long it's going to be, where it's going to be bent and not bent. For the legs, I do it in one long piece, bend it at the middle so that it will kind of be even more supported. If it was just one leg per wire, it would be pretty hard to fasten it to the main body of the thing. I also almost forgot his wings, so I had to add that in the middle here. And I did the same thing I did for the legs for the wings, doing the thing in the middle and then making the wings each stick out from one end of the other, if that makes sense.
When you have all your pieces, you're going to use a cheaper, kind of not as strong wire, and I think this one was used for flower decorations, and that's where I found it, in that section of the Hobbycraft store. You're going to use that and take that around all the pieces, connecting them together to the main body wire. Then I'm going to use a lot of glue gun. I use a lot of hot glue guns for this. Just pump that in there to kind of get it stable. And yes, I do burn myself a lot when I do this. I also discovered the wings being the wrong way, so I had to bend them back. Then I used a lot of kitchen foil to kind of support the body even more. You don't want to use clay for this, you don't want to waste it, but I do use clay on top of this later to kind of try out a more structural way to do this before I haven't used clay on top of the foil. But for this I wanted to try it just because I needed it to be quite sturdy, and but it turned out to be quite heavy, so I wouldn't recommend it. For the wings, I actually gave him 2 different fingers and 1 claw to where I could attach the clay for the claw. And for the legs, I just made 3 other toes, which would then connect to the last one, which is connected to the body and the legs. It's very tricky to get them to stick together, but a bit of ingenuity and just persistence, you will get it to stick together so it could stand. Also just use a lot of hot glue gun. That is my trick for this. I just use it for everything. Then it comes to the sculpting bit, which is my favorite bit personally. I use Super Sculpey to create the heads. So I take out quite a big chunk of it. I use foil to kind of create a little mask around the wires, so I know where it will attach the wire, so you can see it's inside of the clay at this moment. I put the eye in at this point as well to see the size. It's very important to get the size right, so I use my guide for this. And I just start smoothing out, sculpting, getting the snout the long distance, the nose in, the mouth in. It's really just a process of sculpting. I don't really have any particular tips other than try to make it look like your design and your character. I also try to tuck in a lot of different, like if it's a mouth, I don't just draw a line, I take and bevel the edges so that it looks natural. I also had to make sure to be able to pop up the eyes again, because I couldn't put the eyes in the oven because I think it's resin. I'm not sure if they're oven proof, so I didn't want to take the chance. So I just poked a lot of deep crevices around the eyes, making sure that I could pop them out before I put the whole thing in the oven. I put in, of course, his signature teeth. Very important for Greylegs. He always doesn't look like him if he doesn't have his teeth. I put those in, I smooth out the whole surface as much as I can. It will, of course, leave finger marks because, well, it's clay, so I'm going to use sandpaper later just to remove that. The head done, I'm going to move on to the claws and the feet. These were a bit tricky, I've never done this before, and I'm actually sculpting the toes, the tip of the toe and the claw on the wire. So I put a little bit of just a round clump of clay around the bend of the claw, if you get what I mean, and then I will extend that wire with clay to make the claw. It's a bit tricky to explain, you'll see it in a bit after it's been in the oven. With aluminium wire, it can go in the oven, so no problems there. I put the whole thing in there for about 15 minutes, and that made it quite sturdy and ready to be painted and continue the sculpt. As you can see, that's how the toes look now. It was important for me to have a little bit more than just the toe to create the claw, because or else it wouldn't attach very well. Don't worry, I did not put the eyes in the oven, I just put them in after, but they were really tricky to get out again, so I had to pop them out before I did anything else with the sculpture. But then when they were out, I used very cheap sandpaper to kind of smooth out all my little fingerprints and other like imperfections that I've done while sculpting. It's very easy to bump this and just create like a bump that you don't want, so I did that for everything, including the fingers and the claws. It was a bit tricky, I actually ended up breaking a few bits of the claws, which is a bit annoying, but that's just gonna happen. For the next bit, I'm using an old t-shirt. You can just use any fabric that you have lying around. I actually prefer fleece, but I didn't have that, so I just used an old t-shirt. I wish I had fleece though, because it's a bit smoother, this went off very bulky, but I used hot glue gun to just swirl that around everywhere. I also attached the head, but I don't have the footage of that. At this point, I realized that my legs needed more support, so I made a bit of a crutch of just like popsicle things I had lying around, and I glued that onto the leg where I knew it wouldn't be able to bend. I also put on a bit of weight on the back because the head was really heavy. I also wish I'd done this a bit smoother than this big piece of heavy fabric. As you can see, it didn't help very much, but it helped a little bit. And at this point I also realized that I needed even more support, so I used a double wire, so I used another piece of wire to just glue that on for extra support. You won't be able to see this later in the sculpt, so it doesn't really matter. It's just for extra precaution and making sure that this creature can stand up. Then of course I'm gonna wrap that whole leg in fabric as well. I usually do that everywhere where I know it's gonna be quite padded. I just like giving the wire some extra structure and support. By doing this as well, I prevent myself from bending the wire too quick and too rough. So if you do that, you will break the wire, and you don't want that when you're doing one of these. I also ended up putting a bit of back support on his butt because he needed it. Moving on to the fun bit and the time consuming bit, which is the needle felting. I have two different kinds of wool. One that's really cheap, which is to the right. You can see it's kind of in more fibers, and the one to the left, it's smoother and longer and more like hair. I'm gonna use the rougher one for most of this because it's cheap and it also felts quicker. And I just like the rough texture, and I decided to use smooth one to kind of create a separation between the body and the feathers and the legs and the tail, because they're a different material. So I start with swirling that wool around the wire, or the padded wire, by using glue gun and then using my needle to really just tuck in all the fibers. If you don't know what needle felting is, there's lots of tutorials on YouTube on how to needle felt. I just do it intuitively. I just stab the wool a lot of times and it firms up. And luckily for me, it takes a lot shorter amount of time than I thought it would. I could probably do this a lot longer and get a better result, like a smoother result. I'm just really lazy, so I'm not gonna do that. Either way, this took a long time anyway. It doesn't matter how little or how long I do this, it will always take quite a while to get the wool to firm up and stick together. The first layer I find of wool around the sculpture took the longest. I think it's because then it needs to kind of felt to each other, or felt to just loose wool, which is kind of tricky. But then when you add new wool on top of this, it will be easier to felt because it can already be felted into the already felted wool, if that makes sense. This is very different from my other dolls that I've done before, because I usually just used fake fur to kind of put around the body and then sew. So this took a lot longer, but the result is a lot better and a lot more streamlined, which I really enjoy. So what I do is really just pad the whole thing, just add on wool and put on more, and just figure out where you want the sculpture or the doll to be a bit more bigger and a bit firmer. You can see I'm adding more to the back and to the neck, and really just keep firming it up. The legs were probably the hardest bit because they had all those toes and I couldn't quite figure out how to make it look streamlined. I ended up kind of gluing a little bit to the clay part and then swirling around and then just firming it up, simply as that sounds. And this was probably what took the longest to kind of get that first layer on there, and then doing the tail as well, which is really, really long, and just getting everything to be a bit smoother and a bit more firm. Then when everything kind of got a layer of wool around it and it's kind of decent enough to move on, I actually decided to move on to painting the clay because I wanted it to look a bit more like Greylegs, not just like a chicken, which is basically what I preferred it to in these stages. And I use actually quite cheap Hobbycraft paints. It's just acrylics. I'm pretty sure it was like £5 for that whole pack of different paints, and you can probably invest in better paints, but honestly I don't see why I would right now. To me it just works using cheap ones anyway. I just ended up covering the whole thing a dark blue, and then I worked a lot more on the snout, making it a lot more pink later. The tricky thing with acrylic is to make it blend, so especially that fade from purple to like dark blue on the snout is quite difficult to get smooth with acrylics, so I wish I'd had something else to use, but you know, I didn't have that. The one thing I wanted to make sure that I could do with this sculpture that I didn't get to do with the other ones that I've done before is to have it's quite streamlined from the clay to the wool, and that's going to be tricky, and I'm going to show that in a second. But first I need to do his ears, which I use just the cheap wire again, and make a few pieces, glue them on his heads, and then felt, just like little teardrop shapes, quite long, a little bit thick, and then make 2 of them, and then kind of thread them on that wire to make them a little bit posable, just for easy sake, so I know how to place them later. They're quite easy, you just stab them into the foam a few times and attach them. As easy as that. For the streamline thing, from his clay face to his wool face, I wanted to use just wool chopped up into little bits and then glue it on to kind of make it streamline into the clay. But that didn't work very well. It was very clumpy and just did not stick as well as I wanted it to. So I actually ended up using a method that I used on the toes as well, which is what I'm showing you, because I didn't actually film the thing on the face because it was annoying me and I didn't want to film it when I didn't know what to do. So I make like a big sheet of wool, I chop it up, and I kind of glue it onto the clay bits. So I had to measure it out quite nicely, especially when I was doing like 6, 9, 8 toes, that's the right number. And I wrapped it around and then I glued it on, just on the clay, not on the wool. But then I would use the ends of that little sheet of wool to kind of felt that into the toe. So it created kind of like a streamline effect, even though the toe was made of clay and the wire was in between there. Be very careful with this because there's clay and there's wire and you don't want to break a needle. I think I went through like 3 needles doing this, so be careful. I'm very I just do it and I ended up breaking a lot of them and it's kind of scary. Then I just wanted to pad out the feet a bit more because I wanted them to have a bit more thickness, I guess. Just do like I did before, just adding more wool and poking it in. It takes a long time, but it's worth it in the end. Then I decided that I wanted the legs to have a bit more different texture than the rest of the sculpture, so I used my other type of wool, which is more expensive, but it's also prettier and shinier, and it's just easier, not easier to felt, but easier to work with in a way. Unfortunately, you can see a lot of the creases a lot better. It won't look as like easily connected as the other ones, but it creates a different effect, and that's what I wanted. So I just kind of swirl that around the leg and just continue with different colors as well, just to get a bit of a fade. The way you fade is just to make the end quite loose, and then that's what you felt into the other color. It's not going to be like a smooth gradient, but you know, it's gonna work decently, and just work you around up to the end of the leg, really. See, it has really cool effect at the end where it actually looks streamlined, which is what I wanted. Yay! Then it was time to give the sculpture a bit more of a color effect. As you know, Greylegs is full of different shades of green and blue and purple, so I wanted to show that in his like belt as well. So I put a lot of different shades on his neck in different patterns and little blobs, and I felted that in, used different purples, felted that in. As you can see, it's pretty hard to fade. I would just take your time and make sure to kind of lift up the fibers that you feel is too harsh to make a bit of a smoother effect. I used about 3 different colors for this. I had the dark blue for the neck already, and then I used a turquoise, a purple, and then a light blue. Then I wanted to make the tail kind of the same texture as the feet because I felt like it needed to be separated from the main body of feathers as well. So I used the same kind of smooth wool as before. I will probably link all the different wools that I've used and where I've bought them down below if you're curious. And this took a while, just swirling it around, making sure that it was the right thickness, because if you squeeze it too hard it's going to be a different bulge and you don't want that. And I actually ended up fading 4 different colors here, a light blue and then into a more of a grey color, which was really nice and actually wish I'd used for the legs, but never mind. And then into a yellow color and then into an orange color. This was like a random design choice I did for the book when I did the cover because I had the tail and I was like, well, why not make the tip of the tail orange, because why not? It looks kind of cool. Then it was time to move on to the part that I was kind of waiting for and kind of dreading and kind of like looking forward to, because I knew it was be kind of a tricky thing, was the wings. So I started off laying out the wing and measuring it to create kind of like a sheet. This will be the top wings in a way. It will also make a little bit of a nice shape when you fold the wings. They're not going to be realistic because my character doesn't look realistic, so I didn't want to make it that way. I also wanted to put in some different colors like I did on his neck, so I felted that into the sheet as well. Then I attached that to the top of the wing and kind of folded it over, and also made sure to kind of make a smooth edge so it looks like the top of the wing, just without any feathers. I did this on both sides, trying to make them look the same but at the same time be different. Then I moved on to the fingers, which is like the feathers really, and I made quite long feather shapes, like 4 of them, so they would fit onto the posable parts of the armature. I just put the armature down onto it, and this is like underneath of the wing, and then I just firm up the wool around the wire. I was like thinking about gluing this, but I ended up not. And I think that was a good choice because it didn't really need to be glued, it just needed to be added extra wool to it later just to make sure that it would like stay where it was supposed to stay. And also, but again, be careful felting around wire because it's gonna be difficult. Then I actually created another felted sheet. I cut into it so to create just like loose feather parts. This also needs to be like felted around the edges when you cut it, because if you don't do this it's gonna like loosen up, so remember to felt around your edges when you cut it. Then I felted that onto the underside of the wing and just around where the fingers kind of meet. Then I put the top sheet down again and felted that onto it. I also wanted to chop that off a little bit so that I could make a bit more feathery bits, and then I felted that onto the darker feathers underneath and the fingers. I call it the fingers, but you know what I mean, it's the posable part of the feathers, pretty much. Then I put another big fluff of wool underneath the wing just to attach everything together and kind of make it more seamless so you wouldn't see the armature or anything like that. It's simpler than I thought it would be, and it looks quite neat. So at this point there's just details needed to be added to the feet, like little pads. I wasn't sure if I wanted to add them, but I did in the end. I'm very glad I did because it kind of creates a different texture on top of the silky smooth wool that I used to kind of put on the feet. This is quite simple. You just put a big fluff on the foot and then you just felt around it and make sure to tuck in any edges so that you kind of create a shape. At this point we needed to make all the feathers that sticks out from his neck, which is kind of like a time-consuming part, so you just make a lot of little like teardrops, like a lot of them. I think I made around 30, I think. These take a while, maybe like 3 minutes each or maybe less, I'm not sure, I didn't time myself. It takes a while, but it's really worth it in the end. I'm probably sure I could have felted them even more. But just keep rolling them, I guess, and just keep felting them and they will get there. Then attaching them to the head was quite easy. It was just placing them like we did anything else with wool and just felted them into the neck and the head. I don't think these are quite so secure, so I have to be careful not to bump them too much or pull them off, but then again they're quite easily to attach, so it's fine. I did of course not want to use glue for this because then it's going to look very bulky and just not nice. So it looks pretty cool at the end. It looks like he has some kind of dreads, but I find that really cute somehow. Then at the end I wanted to give him some fluff on his butt because he needs that to kind of cover up any like edges or where the leg goes into his body pretty much. So I created 3 blue and then 2 purple big feathers that I then placed on his back, kind of like in a feather pattern, I would say. 3 first with the purple, and then I used the 2 blue on the sides on top of that, kind of like fish scales, and then the last blue on top of that to kind of just seamlessly attach that to the rest of his body. I did use more wool on top of this just to make it even more seamless. The whole key for this sculpture is pretty much make it look seamless and like one thing. Then it was time to make the face shiny and nice, so I used a lot of Modpodge just to make it shiny. I'm still not glued in his eye, so that is the next step. Just after I've made his nose super shiny, that's my face. I used some glue, just tacky glue. I wasn't sure if I wanted to use super glue yet, just to make sure that I could pop them out if I just needed to change something. So I used some tacky glue and just put them in place, and he's done! Before you go, I just wanted to show you guys how Posable is, because I don't think I managed to show that in the making of. But he is fully Posable, like you can do anything with him. I kind of wish he had eyelids, but I couldn't figure out how to do that, and that would be quite a lot of work. And I was also considering giving him a Posable jaw, but that was again a lot of work, so I didn't. Maybe in the future I will do a Greylegs version 2, but for now I'm pretty happy with his mobility, and just the look of him is quite nice. So maybe in the future I'll do another one with all the extra added elements to this design, but for now I hope you guys liked it.
So that was the end of the creation of Greylegs the doll, I guess. I can't speak today apparently, but I hope you guys really enjoyed watching a new thing from me. I've tried to film as much as I could of the creation of this guy. Can you see how big he is? Like, I don't think you get the sense when I'm filming that how big he is. He's giant. I don't think I've ever made a doll like this. And he took such a long time. I've been like working on him all week. And I'm so proud of it, and I feel like he still needs a bit more work, but he's good enough to be shown, so that's good. And I absolutely love him, and I've been talking to him, and it's been amazing. So we even have like posable wings, which is like one of my favorite parts to make, also the most stressful part to make. But I hope you guys liked it. It's very different from my art videos. I hope you guys liked it enough for me to continue making videos like this. It's very time consuming, but I love making them. Just the end result is really cool. So thank you guys so much for watching. I also might have bought a doll for repainting into Eva, so that might be coming in the near future of me actually trying doll repainting and not just doll making. So I hope you guys want to see that, because I bought it. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Bye bye!
I just want to say thank you to all my Patreons because they're amazing in supporting me in making art every day and every week. Thank you guys so much. If you guys want a shout out at the end of my videos, please check out my Patreon link. It is in the description. So I want to say thank you to Christy Peters, Judith Lopez, Pippa Ashton, Kristen Blaga, Jessie Grell, Casey Golden, Christoph Rias, Mark Thomas, Samantha Jones, Matilda Bouvier, Wolfsong Luna, Megan McLaughlin, Victoria Piles, Tassia Egan, That One Girl, Nano Fantasy, Melly, Alexandra, Patty Orchestrum, Anestra, Amanda Friends, Victoria Miller, Kayla Rosemary, Babbitt, Live Lockdown, Phil Booth, and Okabuki. Thank you guys so much.